And that's another thing my parents taught me. Basically, when things are tough, Liza, that's when you grow. If it's not tough, you don't grow. Like if it stays stagnant, if everything's hunky dory and wonderful, there is no growth. And without growth, you're really not going to be happy, and you're not going to develop as a person, and you're not going to be able to be a contributing member of society and help other people.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's podcast. Today, I have my new friend, Liza Peterson, on, and I want to say a little bit of how it is that we connected. We've actually never met, and Liza is friends with two of my former guests in this show, Valerie and Kim. And she listened to their episodes and connected with me, and we were able to talk, and she'd love to share her story. And so that's how we connected. So I'm so excited to have you on, Liza.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank
What a
you.
wonderful thing that you're doing here. It's really super. It was important when we initially connected, but even more so now with everything going on in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always different layers of grief. And the moment that we're recording this is, of course, during the pandemic, and at the same time, a lot of protests and a lot of people standing for justice in this country, and actually in others as well. So a lot of change and transitions going on around the world. So um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's definitely a lot of people probably experiencing grief through that process. But
Yes.
yeah. So when Liza and I spoke a few weeks ago, just to kind of get to know each other and really see what it was we were going to share in this call, we connected in different levels too. We realized we're both theater majors. So if we end up talking a little, we actually did a little uh, warm up with our voices just right before, did we not?
Yes. Toy boat. Toy
toy
boat.
we did toy boat because my tongue was kind of stuck in the Spanish mode because I'd just been speaking to my husband, and I was like, wait, I need to kind of reprogram my
That's
brain. I'm
right.
going to be speaking English now. I need to kind of reprogram my brain and my tongue so that I don't have as thick of an accent when I'm talking. So we were doing some warm-up exercises before we we started
That's right.
recording. A little behind the scenes truth. So Liza, tell us a little bit about you, where do you live, your kids, and such.
Sure. I live in Chappaqua, New York, which is actually the town I grew up in. Left for a while and moved back 10 years ago. I have four kids, a daughter and three sons that range in age from 6 to 16. So we have a full house.
A full house, busy in the last few months of being home. Do you homeschooled before this, or
We did
just only
not
in this kind of
homeschool before this,
before?
but these
Okay,
last 3 months of, I guess, what they call now distance learning
distance learning, right? But that
has
the
been
parents are also,
been a lot.
yeah,
My
yeah.
older two are teenagers, so they're pretty self-sufficient, but the younger two are first and second grade, and those little boys have needed a lot of help, and it's definitely been challenging. I
Right.
do have a teaching degree, but it's different when you're teaching other children as opposed to teaching your
Oh,
own.
oh, I know that so well. I used to own a children's gym. And I remember when I had the kids there, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so good with kids. Oh, when I'm a mom, I'm gonna be so good because I can get these kids to listen and all the kids at the gym." And then when I had my own kids, I was like, "Wait, why don't they listen to me? Like, why don't the kids when I worked at the gym would listen to me, but my own but my own children
Well,
don't."
it's they're very clear that you're not their teacher and you're mom.
Exactly. You're
So
your mom. You're their mom. I know it's so funny, but it definitely it's like a shock, like when you have come from the education back, like from being a teacher in some shape or form, and then you have to teach your own kids, right? It's a little bit like of a shock, like you're like, wait, why? It
oh,
worked
oh,
with these other
absolutely.
kids.
And I feel for those teachers, because I'm not actively teaching right now, who are actively teaching as well as schooling their own children. One
Oh
of
yeah,
my
double
children,
duty.
who's in first grade, his teacher has four kids like me, and they're even younger
Oh
than my group. And I can't even imagine doing the distance
wow.
learning while keeping her
Well,
four
also
children together.
wow, yeah, that's a big undertaking there for her, for sure. And so you have the 4 kids, the live in the East Coast, and you're back in the same town you grew up with. Now, what's big? What other city is the town? I don't think I can pronounce it. Can you say it again? The name of your
Chappaqua,
city?
Chappaqua.
Chappaqua.
It's known pretty well because former President Clinton and Hillary Clinton live here in our town.
Oh,
It's
you
in
see,
Westchester County, a little less
okay.
than an hour outside of New York City.
Okay. Okay, you see, but I did not that's one little, trivia question I did not know of Mr. Former President Clinton being from there. So now I know, and now I
Yes,
can't unknow that.
yes,
So
yes.
thank
He's
you.
one of.
Thank you
There are a
for that
few
trivia.
notables in Chappaqua, but I would say former
Okay.
President Bill
Well,
Clinton
and
and
there's
Hillary
Liza
Clinton.
Peterson, of course, and Liza from
Why? Thank you, Kendra.
Well, yeah, now I've got more standout names from the town. So
That's
that's
right.
awesome that you came back to where you grew up.
Hmm.
And so we talked then a little bit beforehand again about what it is you wanted to share. And you've had a very, wow, I don't know how trying last year. A trying would be, I don't know if that's the right word, difficult, life
Challenging.
changing,
Yeah,
challenging,
challenging.
lots of
Mhm.
words, challenging last year. And so let's start with that sharing about the your dad, so we could start there.
Sure. Well, actually, 3 years ago, almost, 2016, my father was diagnosed with a type of cancer called mantle cell lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. And we found out that he had it just 3 weeks after my mother had retired from a job she had worked at for over 30 something years. And it was a very unexpected diagnosis. He was walking around seeming very healthy, playing golf in Palm Springs with my mom. And shortly after his diagnosis, after a lot of treatment with like the top doctor, I think, really in this world for this type of cancer, sadly, nothing seemed to work. And from the time of diagnosis to the time he passed away, which was September of 2017, was only 18 months that we lost my dad. Um, and, that was really my well, really my second loss, a major loss in the family. We had lost my mom's brother a couple of years before that to pancreatic cancer, but certainly
Mhm.
as my parent, it was a little bit of a different type of loss.
Of
And
experience. Can
we
I
were,
ask you?
sure,
I'm so
go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you because you had you just said your uncle had passed away and he's your mom's brother. So how did your with your mom then that meant that for her two really close people in her life, the brother and then husband passed away within a very short period of time. How did your mom what did you see in your mom after your uncle passed away, and how she dealt with her grief after he passed away, and then did that carry through a little bit of how she showed the grief after your dad passed?
Yep, absolutely. And you said, which something that was very evident to me as her daughter, that my mom was her only sibling, her brother who passed,
Mm,
and then her husband did both pass away over a period of a couple of years. But what I saw in her, both when she lost her brother and when she lost my father, was the incredible, strong person that she was, and her ability to be extremely resilient no matter what life threw her. And it threw her a lot. And though I'd be lying to say that she didn't have her challenging, sad days, because she did, both when she lost her brother and, of course, losing my dad, she was always an inspiration to my brother and I, in showing how, despite life's challenges, you rise up and you find a way to move forward and still live the best life that you can.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
yeah, she was just tough, really tough, full
Mm,
of love and soul, but tough.
mhm.
She amazed me, really, in both of those situations, how she just marched on.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Sorry to make that parenthesis there, but I wanted to kind of just draw on that because, again, that was one of the first ways of what you also having that example of how somebody grieves, even though it's now in your adult life, right? You're seeing your mom go through the loss of her brother and then the loss of her husband. And again, I'm seeing that, that, and then
Yeah, and
seeing
both
that,
to
yeah,
cancer. My
and
uncle
both
had
to cancer. Yeah.
pancreatic cancer, and then my dad, had mantle cell lymphoma. Both, rare and very well. Pancreatic cancer, sadly, I think is more common
More
than it should be.
common. Yeah.
I know we share that as
Or we
well,
share that, yeah, with
but I
my
think
mom's
mantle
passing.
cell
Yeah.
lymphoma, yeah, is
Yeah, that
is
one I
more
had
is not
not
as
heard
common.
before.
But both sadly, lived, my dad 18 years and 18 years, excuse me, 18 months, and my uncle, almost 2 years, which, for pancreatic
It's a
cancer
long
is
time. It's a
phenomenal.
long time.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a long time for that. The and then the grieving process in both cases also starts the moment of diagnosis. So as a whole family, you guys have been grieving for quite a bit in that period of time too. So with like your uncle's diagnosis to then his passing to then your dad's diagnosis to then his passing. So that process of grief was long to some extent.
It was, and that period of time, it did feel like it was just like one bomb exploding in
Mm.
our family after another. It just, as I said, my mom was extremely tough, but I do remember her just telling me after she went to a regular checkup at the doctor, because my father and I all had the same internist, and just saying, well, Dr. Krieger, I lost my brother and now my husband, so basically, where do I go from here? Um,
Gosh.
yeah.
Wow, that is just a lot, a lot. Now, what were some of the ways that you all honored your dad's passing then? Um, yeah, when he died, how did you honor his memory? What was the way that you did it as a family?
Well, I would say the number one thing was through humor, because my
Mm.
father, and I'm looking at my parents' picture right now where I'm recording this, was incredibly funny, like cracking jokes all the time, like just really, really funny, and very good at, when things were tough, ironically, still finding a way to smile, to laugh, to break, the tension. And
Mm.
I remember my mom saying, well, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. And of course, crying is not a problem. It's an important, cathartic way.
Part of it,
But
yes.
so is laughing. So is
Hmm.
laughing. Laughing, like,
Hmm.
changes your energy, and I think it affects your blood pressure. It affects the way that you look at things. So I feel like right to the end of my dad's life and beyond, in our toughest moments, my mom and I and my brother, we still found ways to laugh. And
Mm.
part of that was through memories of my dad, like just really funny things. Like, he was a huge gadget guy. Like, my mom would always say, if one watch was good, your dad thought 20 was better. So, we would go around the house sometimes, and she would just point out some, army clock he got that, like, after all his trying, didn't even work. But he just thought it was like the best find possible, because that's who he was, and So we did a lot of
So
that.
a collector, kind of like a collector to
Oh
some
yeah,
extent?
he
Yeah,
was a
yes.
pack
What
rat,
what other things
definitely.
did he what were some of the things he liked to collect?
Oh, he loved kitchen gadgets. He was a great
Mhm.
cook. So he had, not just one coffee maker, but he had like the espresso maker, the cappuccino maker, the panini press, the quesadilla maker. I mean, even now as I'm going through, their kitchen stuff, it's incredible. And I think my mom got rid of some of it. They have an incredible amount of. You would have thought he was like, Wolfgang Puck or Guy Fieri or
Maybe
something like.
maybe he felt he was, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe he
yeah.
felt he
So he
was.
had a lot of those. A lot of different, like pretty much anything you could think of. My dad had some version of it. He loved like army type of watches, so he had that. He had a lot of like, older kind of post and pre-war stuff. He loved to go to Costco and like pick up, the latest gadget. Um, so it was something both that made him very lovable, but also like annoyed my mom.
Of
Like,
course, because it's like, yeah, you'd find a new gadget. How many watches can could you
oh
need
yeah,
in a
because my
home, or
mom
how
was
many
very
how
meticulous and neat, and my father not so much. So she just
that's
was like, his name was Donald. She'd be like,
mhm.
Donnie, not Ferretti. We don't need this much stuff.
Oh, man, wow. But I'm sure that some of those times, I'm sure she'd probably be grateful that you guys did have that he did have more than one of something. Because if something did break, at least you knew you could find a second
Yeah.
of that somewhere in the house. That's awesome. Now, what, were some of the ways in which you grew up in, like, in terms of, like, your spiritual background or beliefs around death?
Well, I was raised Jewish, very, very reformed, but I did at 13 have what we call as a bat mitzvah, which is considered in the Jewish religion a coming of age. And though I don't really think we talked that much about death until my uncle passed away, and at that point, I was already an adult. Um, my parents just always felt like if you lived a good life, if you did your part, then wherever you went afterwards you were rewarded. And in that type of thinking, they really just continue to raise my brother and I, about paying it forward, about being a good person, about doing the
Mm,
best that you can. And in life, that's the only thing you can do, is show up and do your best. So we didn't, as I said, we didn't really talk, even though it was Jewish, we didn't really talk that much about religious beliefs
mhm.
to my
You
parents.
didn't attend, growing up, you didn't attend synagogue or things
We
like
we
that?
did go, and I
Okay.
did do the bat mitzvah through the synagogue, which
Mhm.
ironically
Okay.
is across the street from where I live now.
Yeah.
But to me, if I was to think about the most important thing my parents would say in regards to
Mhm.
Judaism, was family. That like every
Mm.
occasion, whether it was Passover or Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, it was really for them about our family being together.
Mhm.
And though
And
they're
that's
religious.
huge in the Jewish faith. That's huge in the Jewish community of what I've seen in a lot of my Jewish friends, is that aspect of community and that cultural component of it. Of with every religion has some certain things that become more cultural sometimes, right? Those
Yes.
kind and that aspect of family getting together, for is it Sabbath? Is that correct on Saturday evenings? Is
Hmm.
that right?
Yes,
Sabbath, yeah,
yes,
or
I
things
believe
like
so.
that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so it's all about family and stuff. So that's a beautiful thing to carry on in your life. And then so the family unit, and you guys were definitely really close. How far did your parents live from you? Did they also live in the same town?
No, they moved from this town when I started NYU in college. They
Hmm.
lived in Brookfield, Connecticut, which was about just 45 minutes from where I live now. So they were close, and they were here a lot. Very
Hmm.
active parents and grandparents. As I said, that if that theme has always run through my entire life for my family, is the
Of being
importance of
close to
family.
family.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
being there
That's
for each
beautiful.
other and showing up for each other no matter what, and
Eh,
being very tolerant.
That's beautiful, and that's a beautiful legacy to leave behind to your kids and then for them to continue is that aspect of the family unit being so
Yeah,
important.
and very
So
vital right now with everything going on in the world.
oh, yes, yes, absolutely.
Tolerance, respect
Yes.
for others and their point of view, even when you don't necessarily
Don't
agree
know.
with them.
Yeah, so important. Now with when your mom then became a widow, when your dad passed away, then how often would you guys be able to see her? And, how was that aspect of being able to be there for her and with her during that process of her own grief? And then we'll, move to the second part of this grieving journey.
Absolutely. I would say that I saw her more because prior, right before, prior to my dad's illness, she was obviously taking care of him and always with him. So, we weren't able to see her that much. And then prior to my dad being sick, it was my father who was extremely involved coming down here because my mom was working full time. But when
Mhm.
my dad died, we would see her a lot. She actually came here 2 days a week to help me with my kids, like every week. And she spent a lot of time with us and a lot of time with my children, like helping me carpool them. And like she made one night pizza night and one night fries night at McDonald's. Like,
Wait, fries night? And what else? Wait, no
oh,
other
she
no,
did.
just fries night?
Well, we didn't just eat fries, Kendra. I know you
Yeah, yeah,
guys
yeah,
are
yeah,
like,
it's okay. Because if not, my kids would want to move over to your home
yeah,
if
they
that's
didn't
the
just
case,
eat
if there's a
fries, but,
fries
like,
night
she
at your home.
tried to come up with something to, like, help my husband and I, like, and make it special, so, yeah,
I
they had
love
other
that.
things besides fries, but
Okay,
I think
okay, just
Tuesdays
making
was
sure.
pizza night and Thursday night was fries night, and
Love it, love it.
she really, took her grief and sadness and threw it into, like, spending more quality time with my children, and it was really beautiful because it was also at a time, especially my older kids were getting older, so they really could, value that time with my mom. And I knew it was like a good distraction. um,
Mhm,
and it was a ginormous help to me because my dad was so helpful to me before he got sick, and then the 18 months that he was ill, I really was like a one man band. So it was
mhm.
really, really tough. But it really didn't, I always say she could have really, my mom, and rightfully so, wallowed in her grief and just stayed home and put her head, in bed and put the covers over her face. But she really didn't do that very often and really threw herself into helping me and going back to what I just said earlier, which is to my parents, family was everything. And she adored my children as I know she did me and my brother. So she just put that energy towards us.
It's so what you just brought up was so interesting, and it's something I have heard before in other grieving, seminars or things like that, grief seminars, regarding, of course, the diverse ways in which people grieve, and the people that are doers, which it looks like your mom was a
Oh,
doer.
she definitely was a doer.
Yes, they are thrive in doing, and so for them and that's one of the ways that they still grieve, but by doing. So, for somebody that is a doer to all of a sudden be like, "Oh, no, let me just stay home and cry all day under the covers," is not their way of grieving because that is just so for her, helping you, going to you, that was still her way of being able to still grieve even if she was doing something. Some people go back straight to work sometimes too, and that actually even helps them. It's hard for them to just stop things completely. So it's good to have those perspectives and to hear of the different ways people grieve so that it doesn't especially in a family unit in which there's so different ways in which it could look like, right? It doesn't kind of catch somebody off guard as to, wait, why is she like busy, busy, busy? Maybe she's not really feeling the emotions. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
When it
but
maybe.
anybody who knew my mom knew that. she was a doer. She was I mean,
Right.
like if you wanted to get something done, Linda Warner was your girl. I mean, she didn't kid around. And that's why there was always that dichotomy between her and my father, that my father was a pack rat and bought every little gadget that was out there, and she was very minimalist and like clean and
Right.
neat and organized.
Yeah,
Um
the contrast.
yeah,
And
no,
so now that
absolutely.
you yeah. And now that you're saying you just right now that you said the word was that Linda Warner was. So um if you want to explain now what happened then afterwards and you're in last year.
Well, I'll be totally frank, just when I thought
Mhm.
that our family had sustained enough for quite a while, or hopefully for a lifetime, back in October, I was at home alone. My kids were in school when life was a little more normal. And I had received a text from one of my mom's neighbors that my mom had been in an accident, and they didn't have more information, but they gave me another neighbor to call, and it was also sent to my brother. And my brother, who's a school teacher, was in his classroom, and he called the neighbor and eventually got led to one of the sergeants in the town of Brookville, Connecticut, where my mom lived. And relatively quickly, we had found out that my mother was hit by a car when she was walking and had passed away basically instantly. And my brother was told, he was the one that had to tell me. And as I said, there was nobody here, and it was instantaneous.
I um I know that this being the most recent um loss that you've had and how it happened is a very hard one to talk about. And right now, when you mentioned of you being alone when you received the news, I know we briefly talked about that when the two of us talked and
Hmm.
how it feels to be alone and receiving that news. And I could just feel the energy right in that moment in our conversation.
Yeah, I think I explained to you that. I mean, I remember exactly where I was, in my kitchen when my brother called me, and he simply just said, "Mom is gone." And I do remember screaming, and we live at a condominium complex, and I was like, sure, the whole neighborhood heard me. Um, and then you're just stunned. You just don't
Hmm.
even, my kids were at school, my husband was at work in the city. You don't even know what to do.
You know where to begin. Yeah, like where to begin. Like, so where did you call your husband at work at that moment? Of course, the kids are at school. It's not like you're gonna
Yeah, well, I
suddenly
tried to reach my
call them in a.
husband and I couldn't get a hold of him. I kept calling him and calling him and calling him, and it was strange because he's usually pretty reachable. And then at the time, one of my yoga teachers was just here and had left. And I tried, Angela's her name, and I tried to get Angela and I couldn't get her. So then I texted her and quickly told her what happened. And then the next thing I did was to call a family friend who's a hairdresser right in town who was super close to my mom at her shop. And she ended up sending over her niece, who I knew, and who
Mhm.
knew my mom, who was one of those people that was like really, really good in an emergency, Jessica. So Jessica just took control. Like she called the police, she called the hospital, and then while she was doing that, Angela, thank God, came back with her two little doggies,
Mhm.
to be there for me. And then I kept calling my husband, and it took a very long time to get in touch with him. It turned out after the fact he was walking, like on his lunch hour, doing the right thing, but just not reachable. I think he had turned off his phone or something. So it took me a while to get in touch with him, but of course I eventually did, and he came home, as soon as he could, being in the city.
The fact that you reached out, that you knew you needed to have somebody with you, and that the fact that then from there somebody called somebody else that was good with emergencies, like the whole tribe, that whole aspect of it takes a village component, and really you have that sense of community just with what you mentioned of all these different friends, and that is just beautiful. I got chills just thinking of that support that you were able to reach out to.
It's vital, Kendra, and I can tell
Mm.
you it's that type of support over these last couple of years has meant everything to me and has been like how I've been able to survive, because that yoga teacher Angela, in
Mhm.
addition to, of course, my wonderful family, she was there when my dad was sick. She was on the phone with me when my dad was dying, when I had to go to the hospital to say goodbye to him. So it was really fitting in a way that
Yeah.
I didn't know it, but she was with me doing yoga when my mom was killed. But we didn't know, when we put all the timelines together, we didn't know that at the time. And she did come back, and she stood there while I told every one of my kids what happened too. So that community has been vital.
Wow. Now, how did that work that day in which, so how early in the day was that? And then by the time you picked up the kids, I'm sure they have different schedules of pickup times because of their ages. Um, how did somebody else pick them up? Did you go pick them up? Did your husband go? How did that work out? So
Um,
I'm sorry,
well,
our brains as theater people, I need to see the movie in my head. So the
yeah. Well,
questions
I
I
can tell
ask
you
is
that, to give you a
if you
sense, my
remember any
mom
of
my
it.
mom was
Yeah.
killed around 10 something in the morning, so it was very
Uh-huh.
early, but I didn't find out until about 12:30, 1 o'clock. And my older kids come home pretty early because middle school,
In the
high
bus?
school.
Do they just come in the school bus?
Everyone from the bus, yeah. So my
Okay, okay.
husband wasn't even home yet when my older kids came home, and that's
Mm,
why I was so grateful for Angela, and Jessica was there as well, the one who really thought really quick on her feet.
mhm.
And we told the older kids first, and that was brutal.
I can't that's one of the things too, because 'cause you're navigating your own grief and then also having to find ways of guiding your children through theirs, and they've just gone through the passing of your dad, of their grandfather,
Yep,
and then somebody, and this is not people that they would just see in the summers. This is their grandparents were people that were part of their weekly
absolutely.
life to some extent. And so
Mhm.
that's a huge, huge, huge
Oh, absolutely. And in
loss.
fact, I can tell you that my mother was here the night before driving them around. So they had
Oh,
literally seen my mom the
just
night
seeing her.
before.
Oh,
So,
surreal. That is just like unreal.
so I don't,
Were they
so
like
I
in
couldn't
shock?
register. Oh God, yes. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah, like the registering that you just saw them. What do you mean? Like in the process of, especially because with the grandfather, they had seen the process of the illness, but with grandma,
it was
oh,
instant. It was like we saw her the night before. We went to school. We came home, and she had passed away. I mean, like they knew something was up, though, the older kids, because they saw Angela's car, they saw Jessica's car. My husband had reached out to my daughter, she who's a dancer, and she had danced that day, and said something like he was coming home. And my daughter already had a feeling that something was bad because she didn't understand why my husband was coming home, but she didn't fully
mm,
know. My son Charlie was completely, you know, just stunned. He had a beautiful relationship with my mom, as did my daughter. So, I remember thinking in that moment, like, is it worse my receiving this news, or is it worse for me to watch having to tell my children and their reaction? Like in that moment, I think I was stunned. So seeing their reactions was even more heartbreaking to me on that particular day.
mm, yeah,
And then,
that is
not
just
long after that, my husband came home, thank God. And then the little ones came home, and they're being only first and second grade. They understood to a degree, and they were super close to my mom, and they had seen her the night before. They were very upset, but age appropriately so, and not really. I'd say the older one understood it a little more than the younger one, but that was equally as painful to watch.
yes. No, that is just so much. Now, what happened then after that? Did your brother lived out in
Long Island.
Connecticut
He's on Long
and Long
Island, so he
Island?
was like 2 hours away.
Hmm.
So, again, it was really all kind of frantic. I didn't know if I was going to have to go identify my mom. It seemed that way for a while. Then thankfully they said I didn't have to do that. But
Mhm.
then we left the kids with my friend Donna and Jessica, and my husband and I, actually the older kids wanted to come with me. We had, again, something horrifically painful. I had to drive up to the police station by my mom's house and get her personal belongings that were
Oh,
on her at the time of the accident. And I can tell you that that was probably one of the most painful moments of this journey, because the police station is in the by the rec department, where every year the town of Brookfield would do an Easter egg hunt. And my parents and I would take our kids to that Easter egg hunt because, though I was raised Jewish, I myself am Christian and I'm raising my children Christian. So my parents, as they were amazing, they embraced that.
supported.
And
Mhm.
so I'm getting my mom's belongings as I'm coming out of this police station in total shock. And I just remember looking up at that field. And that's when my husband saw me just lose it. Like, I
Mm.
just was, all I could see was the images of both of my wonderful parents on that field with my kids. And
Mm.
here I was walking out of a police station knowing that I had lost them both now. And it was brutal. The police officer gave me her license, her cell phone, and the car key, which was beat to heck, because she had it on in the
In her
accident.
pocket.
Yeah, and and then we drove towards her house because she had parked her car down at the bottom of this hill to then start walking. So we had to move her car back to her house.
Mm.
So my
And
husband
this is
had
just the day after. This is the day
the day it
after?
happened. No, this is the day it happened.
Oh, the same day. The same
Same
day.
day. The same day.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so much in one day.
Yeah, yeah. So my husband had to drive my mom's car up the hill while I stayed at her house with my older kids. And I can tell you also, just walking into her house for the first time and just seeing her purse on the table, her clothes out that she was going to change into after her walk, you know, was just, it brought, that also got me, because I looked at my husband and I was like, she thought she was coming back. She thought she was just
Right.
taking a walk. And
I
that's the
was
way it
just
should have
even
been.
imagining even dishes, like, like breakfast dishes
Well,
probably on the,
laundry. She had
or
laundry. Her
laundry.
bed was
Mm.
stripped. She had a laundry basket in her room with her clothes that she hadn't had a chance to put away, and it was surreal, Kendra. It just
Oh gosh, Liza. And thank you for sharing this. And I know that it's hard to share, but at the same time, uh, I know that because if not, you would have not accepted to be doing this podcast. That it's also part of that process of grieving. That the more we share, it also helps us in our own grieving process. And that you're also helping others as they're listening to this. Um,
absolutely,
in
thank
their own journeys. So I'm just so grateful to you to share this as hard as it is, and going through all these details.
I appreciate it, and I will tell you, as you had asked me about my mom, as I had said to you, she was one of the toughest women I ever met, and she went through so much, losing her brother and her husband,
Mhm.
that in those moments, especially those initial moments, I just kept saying, I'm Linda Warner's daughter. And if she was that tough and that strong and that resilient, then that lies within me as well. And that's the only
Mm.
thing I could say in those, especially in those
Oh,
first days. I just kept trying to muster up my mother.
love that. I love you're like, I'm just gonna channel her. I'm her daughter. If she could do it, I can do it. You're like, I
Yeah,
can
I
do
figured
it. I
she's
can
half
do this.
of my
The
DNA,
what?
right? I figure
What
she's
did you
half
say?
of my DNA, right? I'm a combination of both
Absolutely.
parents. So whatever chutzpah, as we would say in the Jewish religion, she had, I had as well.
I love that. I love that. Now, what were some of the ways that then you honored then your your mom's passing, then after that, with your dad, then it was a lot of humor, all of you guys, talking about it. What are some of the ways that you and your brother and the kids um, remember your mom,
Right.
aside from all these things of her strength and her resilience? And what are some of the ways you honor her memory? And I know it's still fresh, and with everything now of not being
It's
able
been
to travel,
just 8 months, yeah.
yeah.
Well, she was also very funny, too. So, we would remember a lot of her expressions and, I think a lot about things she said to me. And there's something actually that I was telling Val the other day, which was she always said to me that life is for the living. And she said it to me at the 1 year anniversary about of my dad's passing. In the Jewish religion, you do something called an unveiling, which is when you put the footstone into the grave. And my mom, had said to me, like, well, this is the time, to me and my brother, like, you don't stop grieving, you never stop grieving, but this is the time daddy would want you to continue on with your life. And that's when she said life is for the living. And I kept telling myself that and telling that to my kids, and my brother Ross and I would talk about that mom always said life is for the living. And so my brother and I in particular would talk a lot about, things our mom had told us. Like, he shared with me some conversations that they had had over the last 2 years, about where she was with everything, that I wasn't necessarily privy to at the time, because I
Mm,
think she figured I had 4 kids, my brother has two, and he's a guy.
mhm,
I don't
mhm,
know, she told him more stuff at that time, she didn't want to overwhelm me. And
mm,
we would talk a lot about those things. And what I noticed with my children, particularly all of them actually, but particularly my older kids, would talk about naturally memories of being with my mom, particularly because she drove them around so much. Like, oh,
mhm,
they called her Nanny. Nanny would take a saxophone and then we go to ice cream, or Nanny said this about this house or this landmark, or got lost here, and as we would like go back and forth to her house, like I would slowly bring home pictures of like each kid with my mom or my dad or both. And
mhm,
everybody wanted to like put up pictures, because pictures is a big thing in our family. Because, that when you get to the point of people passing, what I've
mhm.
realized
You
is what stays with
treasure
you is
those. Oof.
the memories, that if
Yes,
you're
yeah,
taking like DVDs or video home movies, you get to still hear their voice,
yes,
pictures, those are the things that are the most meaningful. And those are the things that
absolutely.
stay with you forever.
Especially because they trigger them. So it's not the actual picture itself, but it's the fact that that picture is holding that memory of, of that moment, and so it triggers that memory back again, and so you can relive it. Um, so yeah, that's so important. You're so right. Oh yeah, when the Facebook, you're so right about the Facebook memories when they come up. Oh my gosh, and when they come up unexpectedly. And how's that happened to you in the past
Oh
year?
boy, it has
Oh.
been. In fact,
Oh.
recently, a memory came up. And when I looked at the date, it was 3 years ago. I realized that at that
Mm,
time, I had both of my parents. My dad was still alive
mm,
and my mom was still alive. And I remember saying to one of my healer friends, like, I can't believe that like 3 years ago, I still had both of them. And it really highlighted to
mhm.
me how much I have been through, our family has been through in the last couple of years in a very short period of time. Um,
Changes in a twinkle of an eye, right? Like, it's just like so quickly it can change so
Absolutely.
quickly.
Yeah.
Now, in this process, because you talk very eloquently, and you can know through your words of how much faith you have. Um, So, what are some of those things that you hold on to help you in this grieving process? Of course, and your mom's mantra, basically, of life is for the living, you saying that to yourself and to the kids just kind of allows you to basically put one foot forward every day in your life, right?
Mhm.
What other things do you hold on to allow you to help you in this grieving process?
Well, of course, as I've already said, the importance of family, staying
Mhm.
close, with my brother, and he has two children, and my father's brother is still alive with his wife. So continuing on as a family, to the best of our ability. And then, yeah, you and I talked about this too. For me personally, it goes deeper. In the last couple of years since I lost my dad, I've always been a person of faith. As I sort of quickly said, I changed my religion when
Mhm.
I started NYU. So I have a lot of faith, but that faith also became very spiritual when I started the practice of yoga around the time my dad was very sick. And within that, and it's something that I've also shared with Val recently, is really that deep spiritual connection of knowing that though my parents are not here in the physical sense, they are still within me and they're still with me. And I have seen some definite signs over these last couple of years that, for my dad, and then, more recently with my mom, that it's like they're still there, like softly on my shoulder and my soul, like they're still there. I long and miss them in the physical sense like crazy, and nothing takes the place of that. But that spiritual connection is there. And the more, that I kind of do the work spiritually, yoga, all the things I've tried to do, dance, singing, to connect, that has really helped me know that though they've left the earth in the physical sense, they're here. And, there's also like my mom always used to joke my fourth child, which I think she was like in awe that I had a fourth child. My
Mhm.
little boy Thomas looks like my mom, like in a boy,
Mm.
as a boy. And she would always say, everybody says Thomas looks like me. Well, Thomas, I look in Thomas's eyes and I do see my mom. And
Oh.
one of my dad's friends just recently commented on Facebook on one of my posts and said, "You have your dad's smile." And,
Mm.
again, that warmed my heart because that's still there, right?
Mhm.
That's like a nod from my dad that he's
Yes.
still here through Thomas, right? My
Through
mom is
you
still here.
and you and then your smile, right? You said you have your dad's friend was saying that you have your dad's smile, yes?
Yes, yes. And you
Yes,
know what?
yes.
It brought me back actually to the day before actually my dad passed away. But when I went to say goodbye to him, it made me think about the nurse that I saw that day. She gave me like a really big hug and she said, "It's nice to meet you, Liza. I'm so sorry that I'm meeting you under these circumstances." And she looked me in the face and she said, "You look just like your father."
Mm.
So when this friend in the last couple of days said I had my dad's smile, it reminded me of that very difficult but
Mm.
cherished moment to hear that, like in the last moments
Mhm.
of his life, that this nurse who took care of him at the end of his life noticed right away that I looked like my dad. So
Mhm.
it's just an extension of knowing that that eternal love is still there.
So
And
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then just like you said, seeing your mom in Thomas's eyes and it's just a reminder that they're with you. And and again, like if you've seen, felt or seen signs through these years that have just brought you comfort, of course, all that helps in that healing process and um just makes you still feel connected to them.
well, yeah,
So
I think I
that's
told you about
beautiful.
the mourning doves. I thought that I told you about that.
No, no, no,
Oh,
I don't
okay, you
know.
did tell
Tell
me
me.
about the mourning doves.
No.
Okay,
No, and
so
anyway, you didn't tell the
maybe I
the
told Val, I
audience,
don't know,
so
but in the last
you
couple
may
of
I know
weeks,
sometimes we forget, I'm like, "Who did I tell that? Did I tell it to you? Did I
in
tell"
the
No.
last couple of weeks, obviously with Mother's Day and Father's Day is coming up, and my dad would have just had a birthday. I've been thinking so much and missing my parents. And one day my husband came in and he was like, there's a nest that's forming outside our condo. And I was like, oh, really? And he said there are two birds that are in that nest.
Mm.
And he said they look very unusual. And he looked them up and he said they're called mourning doves. And as in
Oh,
mourning, not morning in the morning, but
yes,
mourning as in
yes.
mourning. And he looked it up, and if you look it up, it's very much like a sign of people who've passed, of showing you they're still there,
Ah,
of strength, of love. And I was like, it's my parents. People may think I'm crazy, but it's my parents. It's my
yeah,
parents, like
yeah.
giving me a nod, telling me that they are still there, that they are still present
Mhm.
with our family, with our kids. They're just showing up a different way.
Yeah, it's just signs of in nature that just make you feel connected in that moment, whether whether it's that we wanna interpret it that way or it is them, like, giving us those little messages. I am truly a believer in that, how much nature plays a part in our healing, um, as well, in our grieving, journeying and our mourning journey, more like the mourning doves. That's
Morning doves. Sometimes you just
the
have to be
mourning
open to
doves.
it, because I always think,
Yes,
like,
yeah,
my whole life there's probably been signs, but if I wasn't paying attention, I missed
looking,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, we have to be open. Now, what are some of the things that you feel that have been the most impactful in your growth, or what are some of the ways in which you've grown in this past year? Or let's include the couple of years too. With I guess it would be 3 years, including your
My dad.
uncle's passing to then your
Well,
dad's
longer from my uncle, but
diagnosis.
from my father, yes, it would be
Or your
it'd
dad
be
from your
3 years
dad,
3
okay.
years.
So in these years, how what is and what are things that you actually feel grateful for in this process as hard as it's been?
Yeah, it's so interesting because initially when I saw grief and gratitude,
Mhm.
I was like, how do you put those 2 together? Like,
Mhm,
how can you
mhm.
have both? But as time has gone on, I've realized that the more you loved a person when they passed, the bigger the grief. And the
Mm,
bigger the grief and the bigger the love, the bigger the gratitude is.
mm.
Because, it's almost impossible for me to think about my wonderful parents within my grief and my sorrow of missing them and not feel gratitude because
Yes.
they were amazing. I literally could not have asked for better parents who showed up for me, who nurtured me, who were there for me every step of the way, who taught my brother and I what we needed to know, that did good in the world, that left people better than when they left them, in all aspects of their lives. Both of them were really what I would call people who paid it forward. And in knowing that, I do feel even in all this sorrow and grief and difficult challenges that myself and my family have had over the last couple of years, I do have gratitude because not everybody had a Linda and Don Warner in their life who was their parent, who loved them, who did. My father equally was amazing. He did everything for me, for my kids, for everybody. He just was what people would say your dad was just a really good guy. And my mom too,
Mm,
she talk about smiles, she had a beautiful smile.
mm,
And it's through this process honestly that I feel that I have grown the most as a human being.
mm,
This all of this grief have brought me to the practice of yoga, and yoga has taught me so much about myself and about life and a lot of these healing arts like Reiki. I love Reiki. In fact, I got certified for a couple levels of Reiki so I could help others and myself with it. But I really feel in my soul that a lot of the things that have gone on with me internally and within my own life would not have necessarily happened if these tragedies hadn't happened to me,
mm.
and those are the moments where you grow. For somebody else it may
Yes.
not be losing somebody, but it's though when things are challenging, and that's another thing my parents taught me. Basically, when things are tough, Liza, that's when you grow. If it's not tough, you don't grow. Like if it stays stagnant, if everything's hunky dory and wonderful, there is no growth. And without growth, you're really not going to be happy and you're not going to develop as a person and you're not going to be able to be a contributing member of society and help other people. So, it's just like grief and gratitude, though they do go hand in hand, they're so different. So are these experiences, coming out of those experiences, realizing that I have grown so much as a person, probably more in the last 3 years than I did a lot of the years of my adult life. And,
Mm. That is
I tell you, Kendra, I often think to myself, like I hope my parents are seeing this because they don't know they did a really good job.
Oh, well, you have that's the thing, you have to be proud of you know what I mean? It's like, yes, you're hoping we're always kind of seeking as a child, like, "I hope my parents are proud of me," you know what I mean? I hope they're proud of who I've become because
Well,
at
you
the
and I
same
are
time,
both
it's their
parents, right? So I
I'm
feel like we could do it on the other
yes,
side too, which is
yes,
as
I absolutely
parents,
believe that.
we want our children, right? I want to speak for you, but I'm assuming you want your children
Y
to grow up and be happy and healthy and contributing
yes.
citizens.
Members of
So,
society, yes, and paying it forward, and like what you just said, the fact that you decided to choose to share the story here as a way of paying it forward, just like what they taught you. And we started, this podcast talking about that, um, is huge. You're already following their legacy, because legacy is all about what we've learned and what continues to carry on. And then you teaching your kids also how to live their lives. And as an example of, by you being you, right? And following all these learnings that you've had through your grief process, and then the person you're becoming, paying it forward, that creates a ripple effect on how your children will be, and therefore, and they're on. So that legacy lives on. So your parents'
Yeah, and absolutely.
legacy keeps on going.
And it's tested my kids, as you've said, they've had a lot of hits recently too. And I feel like, these ups and downs in life definitely forever change you and test you as an individual. But ultimately, if you let yourself evolve and learn from the experiences and get support where you need it, because we all need it, you can't but not grow. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's back again, even how we started this conversation. We talked about the difficult times we're experiencing as in the world, and what is it? Dad would say, "God darn it!" What is that? That kind of little like old expression like that. How could we not grow from this as a humanity too? It's
Yeah.
like when you go through hard things, you have to grow. If you're not, then it really went for a waste. All that
Yeah, and
hardship
I
was a
don't ever
waste.
wanna think. Yeah, you don't ever wanna think, and it doesn't have to always be as difficult as, what I've been through with losing parents and you've been through. But if any life challenge, you can either, like I said, go against it and not grow from it, not do good from it, not change, not evolve, or you can say this is difficult, this is terrible at times, this is painful, but man, I'm going to use this to grow. I'm going to use this to do better. I'm going to use this to help other people. So when they're sitting, or if they're sitting where I am, maybe I'll say something or do something that will, potentially change the course of, their experience.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Liza.
Thank
This was
you.
just so beautiful. And being, with you, getting to know you because of this I would not know you had it not been for this podcast, because this
Hmm.
podcast that did connect us. Um,
Absolutely.
had you not listened to it, right, of the interview
Yes.
of Val,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Val and
you
Kim
would have
are my
not reached
sorority
out, and now we're
sisters, and
connected.
NYU. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, and here we are connected through this, and now it's again a ripple effect of change. And I appreciate you so much, and the time, and you sharing so many pieces of information. I was actually like taking notes of some of these little, you know, life is for the living. I'm like, wow,
Oh,
this is a
you're the
good one.
sweetest. Well, it
I'm
makes me
taking
feel
notes.
good because that honors my parents. It honors my mom, who said that to me when my dad passed. And that would be like the one other thing I would say is having seen my mom go through that grieving process and having that be so recent and then losing her, I was able
Yes.
to look at how she handled it and try to emulate it, try to be her daughter, try
Yeah.
to not put pressure on myself, but to know how she handled it. She did move forward. She did tell herself life is for the living. She did get up every day and just do
Mhm.
the best she could and continue to contribute despite, great loss and tragedy.
Yeah, you learn from example. She really taught you by example. So,
They
that
both
is
did, yeah.
beautiful. They both did. Yes. Thank you so much again, Liza.
Thank you,
And
Kendra. This was such a pleasure,
I
and I'm honored to do this for you.
thank you so much. Thank you again.
No problem. Take good care.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief,
Gratitude and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.